Welcome to the Metabolic Efficiency Training for Health and Performance Masterclass. My name is Bob Siebahar. I am a sport dietitian, exercise physiologist, strength and conditioning specialist, and the creator of Metabolic Efficiency Training. I'm so excited that you're here. I'm going to give you a great kind of knowledge base and implementation strategies on, number one, understanding what metabolic efficiency training is, but number two, actually how to use it to improve your health and fitness and athletic performance. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so what is metabolic efficiency training? It's kind of a mouthful, and just a little bit of background. I actually created this concept in the mid-2000s. I believe it was right around 2005, 2006. And I created it for different purposes, and that was actually to help athletes eliminate GI distress, because it can actually do that. But since then, there's been so much great, not only research, but also some great anecdotal information from thousands of athletes that have utilized this, that have shown that it can improve health markers, improve performance, improve body weight, body composition goals. But what is it? We'll get to that here in a second. What is it, though? It's a concept. It's a non-diet approach to daily nutrition. And it's kind of hard to explain. You'll see it as we go along in this masterclass. You'll see it kind of come out a little bit. But here's the thing. Metabolic efficiency training utilizes both nutrition and exercise strategies to optimize blood sugar. So that is really the key for metabolic efficiency training, is using food and exercise, but I'm going to focus more on food, obviously, right? To optimize blood sugar. Well, why do we need to optimize blood sugar? I'll tell you that a little bit later. You also should note that there's another concept that I created called nutrition periodization around the same time, actually a couple of years before I created metabolic efficiency training. And nutrition periodization is all about periodizing or segmenting your nutrition to support whatever health goals you have, whatever fitness goals you have, whatever athletic performance goals you have. So nutrition periodization is really about periodizing your carbohydrate, protein, and fat intake each day to support your health and fitness athletic goals, right? Now, metabolic efficiency training should be periodized throughout the year, depending on your goals, and you'll see this come to life here. Now, really at the end of the day, is metabolic efficiency training is trying to improve your body's efficiency in using what we have stored inside. And what we have stored inside are carbohydrates and fats. We don't store protein as protein, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. Now, why should you even care about metabolic efficiency training? Well, I think, I'm a little biased, obviously, but because it's a non-diet approach, right? There's no calorie counting, there's no measuring, there's no weighing. Like you don't need that stuff if you don't want to. Now, if that's your thing, that's totally fine too, right? But the benefits are tremendous. And remember, what we're talking about is how we optimize blood sugar. That's really the proponent of metabolic efficiency training. So when we're talking about the benefits, I mentioned some of them. Body composition changes, body weight changes. If you are an athlete who has GI distress, so nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, it can absolutely reduce GI distress. It can also improve fasting blood sugar and fasting insulin levels. Huge health component here. It can also have a positive impact on brain health and cognitive functioning, and improving mood, improving focus, all by controlling and optimizing blood sugar. It can definitely increase your satiety, so your feeling of fullness, and significantly reduce food cravings. It can help improve sleep patterns, blood lipids. It can help you follow a lower sodium nutrition plan if you're trying to get a little less salt in your nutrition plan. It can improve HbA1c levels, which is a 3-month average of your fasting blood sugar. It can actually impact and lower the risk for certain chronic diseases. And at the end of the day, here's the thing. You have sustained energy. You don't have those ups and downs. So I know you might be saying, oh my gosh, this sounds like an infomercial. It's not. Literally, optimizing your blood sugar has all of these great physiological benefits inside your body and your brain, but we just don't think about that, because here's the thing. We're always flooded with what in the media, the next diet, the next phase, the this, the that, the supplement, whatever. This is really about using food to optimize blood sugar to improve health and fitness markers. That's really what we're talking about here. And that's why I'm so excited. That's why I'm having this masterclass. Now, when do you use it? Literally every single day. Like, think about it. You should be focusing on controlling blood sugar whenever you eat food. And I'll get to how food reacts with certain, or how your blood sugar reacts with certain foods and combinations here in a second. But this is a lifelong nutrition plan. It's not a diet. It's not something you follow for 8 weeks and you've achieved whatever goals you have. No, right? This is your lifelong journey nutrition plan, right? It's going to allow for certain carbohydrate, protein, and fat ebbs and flows based on what's going on in your life, right? It's not a diet. I think I've mentioned that a million times so far, but you have to periodize this, right? So periodizing metabolic efficiency just means stepping back, looking at what you want to do from a health perspective. Do you want to lose weight? Do you want to change your body composition? Do you need to change your blood lipids, your cholesterol, fasting blood sugar, whatever it is? Utilizing metabolic efficiency training based on your goals. If you're an athlete, what races are you doing? What competitions? What type of athlete? Because you know what? Metabolic efficiency training, aka optimizing blood sugar, works for every single athlete of all ages and genders. Doesn't matter who they are because it's not a diet, right? All right. So doesn't matter who you are, what your goals are, optimizing blood sugar is the name of the game. So let's dive in a little bit more here to metabolic efficiency training. I love pictures. I love graphics. I want to show you what metabolic efficiency training, what I'm really talking about here, right? So as you look at this bell-shaped curve, at the bottom of it is nutrition periodization. That is your foundation, because I want you to think about, okay, nutrition or periodization. If you've never heard of this before, that's fine. It basically means look at what you're doing from a physical activity or exercise or training standpoint. Do you do different things on different days? Of course you do. We don't do the same exact exercise every single day. And if you do, you shouldn't, because you need to mix it up a little bit, right? So nutrition periodization is the foundation because it looks at what times of the year, the month, the week, even maybe the day, may you need different nutrition strategies. Do you need to eat a little bit more carbs or protein or fat, or a little bit less carbs or protein or fat? That's nutrition periodization. Okay. Now, when we look at this metabolic efficiency training, which is right in the middle, that's where most of us should navigate, right? It is comprised of 75% of the nutrition that you put in your body, the calories that you put in your body. 25% of this equation or of this concept is based on exercise. Now, I'm not going to talk about exercise too much, but I will mention it in the next few slides. I want to really focus on nutrition here. Now, bell-shaped curves always have outliers, right? There's always about 1 or 2% on either side. So on one side of this is our LCHF, which is low carb, high fat diets and ketogenic diets. Now, this may work for some people, doesn't work for many, and especially long-term doesn't work for many people. On the other side, we have the HCLF, high carb, low fat diets. Sometimes that works for people, sometimes it doesn't, right? So what I'm saying is there will be some outliers. You cannot argue that optimizing blood sugar is better for health, for sure, but there will be sometimes, and mostly athletic individuals, where maybe they do fall on the outside or the outliers of this curve, and that's totally fine. But here's what I've noticed throughout the aging process. Those go away pretty quickly, meaning you will gravitate more towards the inside of the normal bell-shaped curve, and that's where metabolic efficiency training comes into play. Now, when we look at it, why are we talking about, remember what metabolic efficiency is controlling blood sugar through food or optimizing blood sugar through food. Well, who cares? Well, one of the reasons is because we store 2 macronutrients in our body. We store fat in various places in our body, right? Not just the fat that you see if you pinch an inch kind of a thing, right? But we store fat in other places. And in fact, most general population individuals, we have enough fat in our body that can actually, we could probably run 10 to 20 marathons back to back to back to back. That's how much energy we have in our body as fat. Over 80,000 calories stored as fat. Even the leanest of the lean athletes, like if you look at like the Olympic sprinters or marathon runners, right? They look pretty lean. They still have about 30,000 or so calories stored as fat in their body. Just can't see a lot of it. Now contrast that to how many carbohydrates we store in our body. Now, most of our carbohydrates are stored in our muscle. We have a little bit stored in our liver, and a little bit is actually floating around in our blood sugar, right? So our carbohydrate stores actually vary depending on your gender and your size. So males usually store more carbohydrate because typically, not always, but typically they have more muscle mass. Remember what I said, carbohydrates are stored more in the muscle, while females store less. And it does depend on size, right? Because if you're larger size, you have more muscle and you can store more carbohydrate. But here's the thing, depending on who you are, you only store about 1,200 to 2,000 calories worth of carbohydrates. That's, if you're an active individual, that's going to give you about 2 hours, maybe 3 hours of energy for any type of exercise that is of moderate intensity. So you think about that, and this is what led me, one of the things that led me to creating this concept was this dichotomy of we have so many fat stores in our body and we have so few carbohydrate stores in our body. Is there an opportunity to use fat more and store carbohydrates, like preserve carbohydrates until we really need them? Well, of course there is, because that's what I'm talking about right now. But here's the thing. You kind of have to put this in context depending on who you are. If you are an athlete, makes total sense, because there's going to be certain times of the year, the month, the day, the week, whatever, where you want to just use a lot of carbohydrates. If you're a power-based sports, gymnastics, basketball, soccer, that kind of thing, power-based, you need a lot of carbohydrates to give you energy, right? But not all the time. What about on your off days? What about the other, 22 hours of the day where you don't train, kind of a thing? Contrast that to somebody who does more endurance events. So it's not super high intensity, but it's longer. Well, for those athletes, using more fat stores as energy makes total sense because they want to preserve carbohydrates. So it doesn't matter what type of athlete you are. If you are an athlete, you do want to preserve your carbohydrate stores as much as possible until you really need them. Thus, you want to teach your body to burn more fat at certain times, not all the time. There's a time and a place for this. There are times where I work with some athletes where we want to maximize their usage of carbohydrates. So they actually eat more carbohydrates so they can burn more carbohydrates so they can use more carbohydrates. But then there are times where we don't want to do that. The great thing about the body is you can switch. Absolutely. So you can teach your body through the food that you eat. You can teach your body to burn more fat and store more carbohydrates, or you can also teach it to burn more carbohydrates and store more fat. One is not better than the other. It depends on what you need as an individual to improve your health, to improve your fitness, to improve your performance. And that's the benefit. It's kind of the Pandora's box, right? Because a lot of times we just want an answer. We just want to follow a diet, but that's not the right way to do this, right? The right way to do this is to step back and say, what do I need? What are my blood lipid levels like? What's my testosterone and hormone levels like? What do I need as an individual? And then what is my fitness routine? What is my training program, right? Then you step back and say, okay, this is how I should eat based on all of my goals. And that's one of the purposes of this masterclass, is to enlighten you on this. Okay. So let me give you another graphic. So metabolic efficiency training in the past, and I don't want to bore you too much, but this actually, when I was creating this concept, I was trying to figure out if there was an opportunity to teach about nutrition here, right? So here's what you're seeing on your screen right now. The crossover concept is a physiological concept that was created decades and decades and decades ago. And it's basically just this. It states that there's an association between fat burning, which is the red line. That's that red line that starts high and goes low. That percentage of, like you see, the first data point is 90%. That means that the body is using 90% of its energy or its fat stores to supply energy, and only 10% from carbohydrate. So the crossover concept is just the association of how much fat and carbohydrate we're burning based on the intensity of exercise. So here's what we know. If you are just going for a walk and it's low intensity, you should be burning a lot more fat. Now, not everybody does. Okay, talk about that later. But the lower intensity, even to moderate intensity exercise, should burn more fat and store more carbohydrate. Now, as you increase the intensity of exercise, there's a certain point where your body switches over, and that's that star, that's that cross, right? That's where the body says, ooh, intensity is a little bit higher. I can't just use fat as energy anymore. I need faster acting energy. So I'm going to pull it from my carbohydrate stores, mostly from the muscle. That's why you see that blue line, the carbohydrate burning line, go up significantly after that star, after that cross. Now, what we've known from research, and this is exercise only, okay? Keep this in mind here in a second. What we know from research is this crossover point, they call it, the researchers call it, happens between 63 to 65% of maximal intensity. And that can be defined as max VO2 or max heart rate. But here's the thing, when I was doing this research eons ago, I was looking at this and I could not find any nutrition interventions in looking at how the body used its stores of fat and carbohydrate. Now, to me, as a sport dietitian, that makes sense. I'm like, well, shouldn't what you eat influence what you're burning? Well, it absolutely does, which is why I created this concept, right? And this is kind of how I happened across this. But back in the days, decades and decades and decades ago, researchers only looked at the intensity of exercise. And this is what you see if you ever go to a fitness center, health club, or whatever. You always see, like on the treadmills or the Stairmasters, there's a fat burning little colorful chart, like it says your fat burning zone. That is always below 65% intensity because of this research that is 50, 60 years old. Who knows, right? Is there something wrong with that? Well, yes, there absolutely is, because it's not individualized. So this, generally speaking, basically says if you exercise under 65% of your max heart rate or max VO2, you will burn more fat. But above that, you're going to start not burning a lot of fat and burning a lot more carbohydrate. That's absolutely false. And I've proven it over almost 20 years of doing testing and really more research on this topic. So this was the old school. This was the past. Now, where are we at with metabolic efficiency training now? Well, now we know that if we actually introduce some nutrition interventions, i.e. optimizing blood sugar, right, controlling that, if we combine that with certain types of exercise, we get the most bang for our buck. But here's the thing. I work with athletes all the time, and they come to me middle of their season like, oh my gosh, I don't want to make any training changes. Coach isn't going to like that. I'm like, hey, that's cool. You don't have to make any training changes at all, because here's the thing. If you remember from a few slides ago, nutrition is 75% of this equation. You can literally not even focus on your exercise plan and only make nutrition changes, and you will improve health markers, cognitive markers, physical markers in your body. Interestingly enough, too, what we see here is some research proving that we can actually burn fat at higher intensities. Now, it's not only my real life anecdotal, testing hundreds and hundreds of people. And you can see there that in the bottom of the screen, my real life testing, I have proven that you can actually burn fat up to 87% of your VO2 max. That's not what the research said decades ago, right? It only said up to 65%. But, don't take my word for it, because it's anecdotal. It's my data. It's my data that I've gotten on athletes, testing over the years. But interestingly enough, in 2017, finally, a research paper came out proving the same exact thing. And that's what you see. This latest research, and I've got the reference down there in case you want to go to PubMed or Medline and look that up. But this research, which tested hundreds of athletes and different types of athletes, let me just say, from soccer to football to rowing and running, like everything, right? What they found was this metabolic efficiency point, this cross, which I call the metabolic efficiency point, happened between 23% VO2 max all the way up to 89% VO2 max. The take-home message here is you can train your body to burn more fat at higher intensities. So don't believe anyone who says, oh no, there's a ceiling to that. There's not. right? We've found, I mean, research has found you can burn fat up to 89% of your max intensity. I found up to 87%. That's tremendous. And you know how you do most of it? Through changing your nutrition. A little bit through exercise, but again, the majority is changing your nutrition. So let's roll up our sleeves here. Okay, let's talk about nutrition. So let me talk to you about the nutrition roller coaster. And this is some basic biochemistry that I'm going to throw at you. So when we eat more carbohydrates, pasta, rice, fruits, veggies, breads, doesn't matter, right? When we eat more carbs, our body actually burns more carbohydrates because we don't store a lot. Remember, we don't store a lot of carbs. And depending on who you are, how efficient you are burning fat versus carbohydrate in what fitness or sport you're training for, you could burn through a lot of your carbohydrates, right? Now, there's an issue here because that blue line you see on the lower left is your blood sugar line. If your blood sugar constantly goes up and down like a roller coaster, there are some significant health consequences. Not only performance, let me just touch on the performance or the fitness consequences first. The more carbohydrate you eat, the more you burn. The more you burn, the more you have to eat. It's a vicious cycle, right? Because here's the thing. When you're exercising or training, sometimes your body will need more carbohydrate. But if you constantly negate the, eating protein and fat, you're just teaching your body to burn carbohydrate and store fat. Now, those are the performance consequences. I'm not going to get into that too much, but it basically means the more carbs you eat, the more carbs you burn. So when you're exercising, the more carbs you have to eat. That's why a lot of endurance athletes will eat these gels and bars and drinks and everything high carbohydrate, because they're teaching their normal daily nutrition plan is facilitating their need to have to put more sugar in their body during exercise. You don't need to do that, okay? Let me talk about the health implications of uncontrolled blood sugar. That's that unhappy blood sugar line. That's the roller coaster line. That little funny picture on the lower right is a picture of the pancreas. Now, the pancreas is an organ in the body that specifically secretes insulin. There are what are called beta cells in your pancreas, and they secrete insulin. Now, insulin is a hormone that does many great things. One of the things it does is lowers blood sugar. So say, for example, you eat a banana, and maybe a ripe banana has a little more sugar in it. Well, when you eat that banana, because it's a carbohydrate only, it will actually spike your blood sugar. When that happens, the signal goes to your pancreas and says, hey, we need some help. Our blood sugar is high. Can you send out some insulin to help us lower it? Because we don't want to be walking around with high blood sugar. Not a good thing from a health perspective, okay? So the pancreas secretes insulin, insulin swoops in, does its job, your blood sugar goes down again. But then here's the thing, then you start to get cravings, you start to have sugar cravings. The more carbohydrates you eat, the more sugar cravings you have. Let that sink in really quick. The more carbohydrates you eat and the improperly balanced blood sugar, the more carbohydrates you're going to want to eat more and more and more, which means you're going to have cravings for sugar. We don't want that, okay? So obviously we're building up to something here, right? We're building up to the fact that we want to control blood sugar. We want to optimize it. We don't want this roller coaster. It has a huge implication on health, because here's the thing too, the more your blood sugar goes up and down like that, the more insulin gets pumped out of the pancreas, the more insulin resistant the pancreas becomes. There's only a certain amount of time, or there is a certain amount of time where your pancreas is going to say, hey, you know what? I can't keep giving you so much insulin. So it's going to become resistant to it. If you become resistant to insulin, you start developing chronic diseases. So you don't want to overwork your pancreas because your blood sugar is always up and down, okay? All right, so let's talk about blood sugar regulation. Here's our very unhappy blood sugar line, and here's our happy blood sugar line, right? So let me just tell you again and reiterate this. If you are on the blood sugar roller coaster, the blue line, right, you're not controlling your blood sugar that well. So back to my banana as an example. Now, if you put like some peanut butter or nut butter on that, with that banana, with that ripe banana, it'll actually reduce your blood sugar or control it. Why? Well, because that nut butter has protein and fat, and we know that those are necessary with carbohydrate to balance blood sugar. Oh. But if you follow this blood sugar roller coaster, it can reduce mental and physical performance. You might have that brain fog, that cognitive kind of I'm in the clouds, right? Not thinking too well. That sometimes is related to just high blood sugar or uncontrolled blood sugar. Definitely decreases focus and concentration. It increases your hunger. So here's the thing. Physiologically, your body, your blood sugar in a non-disease state, and specifically non-diabetic state, your body's blood sugar should go up and down roughly every 3 to 4 hours for adults. For kids, it's a little bit more narrow, about every 2 hours or so, because they're still developing and they need more nourishment than adults do. So if you think about this going up and down every 3 to 4 hours, if you're eating before 3 to 4 hours, you're not doing something correct in your nutrition, because you should stay full. Like if I'm going to have a morning smoothie and I'm hungry in 4 hours, 3 or 4 hours, then I put all the nutrients that I needed in that smoothie to control my blood sugar. But if I have that smoothie and then an hour later I'm starving, well, I need to look at what I put in that smoothie, because most likely it was deficient in protein and fats. Okay? Now, the body burns more carbohydrate and it stores more fat when you have uncontrolled or unhappy blood sugar. A lot of people don't want that, especially as we age, okay? And I talked about the potential health implications from having uncontrolled blood sugar, right? Specifically, we're talking about an increase in metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, and some disease states. Uncontrolled blood sugar is actually related to so many chronic disease states. It's not even funny. It can actually increase the inflammatory response in your body also. So it behooves us to look at blood sugar through a different lens, look at food through a different lens. We want to optimize blood sugar. Don't need to follow a diet. We just need to look at carbs, protein, and fat a little bit differently. And in comes the topic of how do we do this? Well, I've got a few different tools, but I'm going to present one to you here because it's kind of easy to learn from a masterclass. It's called my Metabolic Efficiency Training, or MET Teeter Totters. So, you know what a teeter totter is, right? You have your fulcrum, you've got one side goes up, one side goes down when you're on them, as long as it's functioning correctly. Well, there are 3 options here. And you can see it on the left. You can see a macronutrient balance. You can see a lower carbohydrate, higher fat. And then you can see a lower fat, higher carbohydrate. So remember, again, metabolic efficiency is not a diet. It's not like you follow this plan and then maybe you succeed a little bit and then you drop off. No, it's not like that. Throughout life, we're going to have times where you're going to have 3 different teeter-totters depending on your health, your fitness, and your athletic goals. You need to remember that, okay? So the macronutrient balance teeter-totter obviously is everything is in balance, right? Balance. I don't really like that word, but I'm going to use it anyway. But let me explain the teeter-totter. The fulcrum is always protein. You see that triangle in the middle. Protein usually doesn't change that much once you find your sweet spot for protein. Now, what I will say is I would say 90% of the people I've worked with in my 25 plus years have been deficient in protein. It is very tough to try to focus on protein sometimes. That doesn't mean that you need to emphasize it. You need to have a high protein diet. You don't, right? You just need to make sure you're having enough. That becomes your fulcrum, and it won't really change that much once you are at a set amount that is good for your body. What changes is carbohydrate and fats, right? Because if you're starting to follow this story, that's what we're storing in our body. We don't store protein as protein. Protein gets broken down as amino acids, and those float around and they do different jobs in our body. Now, macronutrient balance basically says, yeah, protein is where it needs to be. Carbs and fat are relatively balanced. It's not numerical. It's not quantitative. There is nothing about this that is quantitative. I did not create this to be a quantitative diet model, right? Far from the truth. Looking at carbohydrate and fat, and really it's looking at how we maintain body weight. So the macronutrient balance is you're eating relatively all the macronutrients to keep yourself in proper body weight, body composition. Now, the lower carb, higher fat, obviously, is you're reducing your carbohydrate, but at the same time increasing fat to still meet your energy needs. And then lower fat, higher carbohydrate. So maybe there's some times where you need more carbs and you'll eat less fat. That can be based on training needs for the most part. That's where I see a lot of athletes navigating to and from based on their training goals and based on their sport. Now, let's get into these a little bit more, just a little more detail. If we're talking about macronutrient balance, kind of where everything is kind of in balance, it's not quantitative. Like I said, please don't start counting things and weighing things out. This is normal eating. This is intuitive eating. This is realizing when I eat, I'm full and I'm not hungry for about 3 to 4 hours and I'm satiated and I feel good about it, right? That's what macronutrient balance is all about. It's great for health goals, fitness goals, longevity goals, where if you don't have body weight, body composition goals, you're like, I'm pretty good where I'm at right now. This is a great place to start. It could be suitable for athletic performance, but a lot of times we have to periodize the carbohydrate and fat intake a little bit more strategically for athletes. Now, in contrast with the lower carbohydrate, higher fat, now we're looking at, okay, if we have some body composition goals, I'm not going to tell you to follow low carb, high fat or ketogenic because I don't feel that many people can do that long term. But I will say that there's a time and a place for lowering your carbohydrates and increasing fat, not following that diet, but lowering and periodizing it, right? There are some great cellular adaptations. You can actually teach your body to burn more fat. We talked about that a little bit, right? It can be done at any time, but I would say this, if you're active, you're fit, if you're training for something, don't just drop your carbs all of a sudden and, expect performance to be good. It's not going to be good. And that's why we want to take like baby steps. You don't want to go one day eating like a tremendous amount of carbohydrates and then day 2, eat none. That doesn't make sense, right? Your energy level will tank. You have to do it correctly. And then be careful. If you're an athlete, be careful with this approach, because if you follow a lower carbohydrate plan and a higher fat plan too long, can actually teach your body some enzymes that are responsible for some metabolism, metabolic cycles, to become inefficient. So when you introduce more carbohydrates, your body's not good at burning those anymore. So you have to, if you're an athlete, you have to be careful when you use this. Okay. And then the last one, higher carb, lower fat, definitely performance-based. Listen, if you're not an athlete training for an event, I'm not talking a professional athlete, I'm recreational, right? You don't need this unless you are training for something. Absolutely, right? We follow this to maximize our glycogen stores. Those are stored carbohydrate in our muscle and a little bit in our liver, right? Yes, that's when we use it. But here's the thing, not all of us have to use that, and certainly not all the time. And you can eat more carbohydrates in that post-training window, but you don't have to do that all the time. That's another topic for another masterclass, right? That post-workout nutrition window. You don't have to overfeed carbohydrate right after you train or exercise. Trust me on that. Okay, your body's very good at restoring its balance within about 16 to 24 hours. So hopefully that helps you kind of look at kind of understand the teeter totters. There's not one teeter totter, right? You'll fluctuate through different teeter totters throughout the year, throughout your life, throughout your aging journey, right? Just kind of depends on you, what you need. For me personally, I periodize my nutrition daily. So I'm not training currently for anything, but when I do, I periodize my nutrition daily to account for my training load. So, hey, if I'm going to go for a 2 or 3 hour mountain bike ride, I might actually increase carbohydrates a little bit. Maybe, maybe not. Depends on the session, depends on my goals. Mountain biking usually for me is a lot of punchy climbs. You have pretty high intensity sometimes. But if I'm just going to go out for a short 30, 45-minute easy run, I don't feel the need to increase my carbohydrate intake because, again, we want to promote our body to use the nutrient that we need to use at that current time. Sometimes you want to use more fat. Sometimes you want to use more carbohydrate. Okay, now you kind of have an idea of what metabolic efficiency training is, kind of how to use it now. Now I'm going to talk about the testing. So when I created this concept about 6 months later after creating it, I put my exercise physiology hat back on. I'm like, I've got to be able to measure this, right? So I actually created the protocol to test or measure metabolic efficiency. So it's super easy and actually uses all the technology that someone would use for VO2 max testing. But the protocol is the exact opposite. It's very, very easy. It's submaximal exercise. In fact, because we're looking at where your body crosses, if it crosses, we're looking at where it crosses, we want to start at a ridiculously low intensity exercise. And in fact, most people that I've tested don't even reach their threshold. Like they're breathing hard, but it's not a hard exercise, right? The beauty of this, though, is there's a resting protocol. So we see from a resting perspective how efficient your body is at using carbohydrate and fat. And there are some health implications there, and that's why we do resting. We also, on the treadmill or a bike, we also look at how efficient your body is at varying intensities, because that's where we're looking for that metabolic efficiency point. Here's the great thing. You're maybe thinking, well, why would I measure? Well, you don't know what you don't know until you know it, right? So peeking into your body or popping the hood is so important, because here's the thing. If you have your metabolic efficiency measured, you can actually, with the help of a professional, sport dietitian, someone who is certified. I actually, as an aside, I have a whole list of health professionals around the world who are certified as metabolic efficiency training specialists. Some provide the testing, some don't. But these are the guys and girls you want to look for, or qualified sport dietitians, because after you have the testing done, you can actually have a nutrition plan developed based on your current physiology. That's the beauty of it, right? So that's why I tell people all the time. I'm like, well, if you like, I can recommend nutrition strategies all day long, and I'll get pretty close, because I've been doing this for a long time, pretty close to helping you succeed. But the testing just helps us get there so much faster. And I kind of allude to like blood lipid tests, like cholesterol testing, right? If you come to me and say, Bob, I want to lower my cholesterol, I'd be like, hey, great. Can I see some blood work? And you're like, oh no, I never have it measured. I just want to lower my cholesterol. I'm like, okay, well, I can give you a nutrition strategy for that, but I don't know how well it's going to work, because every single person is individual. That's why we do the testing, right? So you get that, but you also get, if you are an athlete, you get how many calories you burn per hour. And from that, you can actually get the exact calories you should put back into your body per hour, and not use the research that is not female based. It's not older adult based, right? It's really not that accurate for most of us, right? So you get how many calories you should consume per hour during exercise, which is awesome. It'll also tell you how efficient you are at using fat and carbohydrate. And that's really the main part of the whole test, is how efficient are you? Because listen, here's the thing. If you're not efficient, we need to change your nutrition plan. And speaking of that, based on the testing, there are actually 3 levels of metabolic efficiency. And I've recognized this. I've identified this early on when I created this concept in this testing protocol. So as an example, if you came in and visited me at Energy Performance and said, Bob, I want a metabolic efficiency test, great. You will fall into one of these 3 categories. There's only 3 categories. The first one is called level 1. If you look on the right side, the graph, the black line is carbohydrate burning. The red line is fat burning. What that graph says is that you start out burning a lot of carbohydrate, which means you're storing a lot of fat. And if that's your goal, then you're doing really good. However, most people that come to me don't want to have that goal. They want to actually burn more fat and preserve carbohydrate until they really need that, not just constantly burn through their carbohydrate stores, right? So level 1, there's no metabolic efficiency point, that MEP. And what I say is that's metabolic fatigue. That is actually an easy fix, because it's all to do with nutrition. It's very, very simple. Well, I say it's simple. Nutrition is a behavior change, so it is difficult, but it is simple to kind of have that implication of improving that metabolic efficiency point. Now, level 2, they have a metabolic efficiency point. You can see red line is fat burning, black line is carbohydrate burning. It does cross. So that point, that's the point where the body switches from more fat burning to carbohydrate burning, because the intensity of exercise is now getting higher. That person looks pretty good. That's like a textbook metabolic efficiency point. There's still room to improve, but I like seeing that in the initial test, because now we know how to navigate. We know the learning curve is going to be a lot shorter. But here's the thing. If you were to ask me, well, how many people fall into that level 1? Based on my testing, about 60% of individuals who I test fall into that level 1. Crazy metabolic inefficiency, depending on what your goals are. And about 30% are in level 2. So they have that metabolic efficiency point. We just make some tweaks. And about 10% are in this level 3. So level 3 is, you can see, fat burning is actually super high. Carbohydrate burning is super low, but they never cross. It's the exact opposite of level 1. These are usually my ketogenic people, right? Because they're teaching their body through their nutrition, their high fat intake, low carbohydrate intake. They're teaching their body to burn more fat, store carbohydrate. But here's the thing, they won't cross because of physical fatigue. So if you think about this, if you don't have a lot of carbohydrates stored, when intensity of exercise gets too high, so think of like a sprint or really hard, if you're running up a hill or cycling up a hill or doing something really, really hard for, a few minutes, your body's not going to have enough carbohydrate to supply that energy. So you poop out, right? So these athletes usually can't really do a lot of high intensity exercise because they don't have that physical support or that nutrition support for their physical nature. So they're not eating enough carbs to support high intensity exercise. Very few people fall into that category. Like I said, 60% in level 1, 30% in level 2. Always great changes to be made depending on what we see. But here's the thing, as a sport dietitian, if I don't know where I'm starting, i.e. we don't have some test data, well, again, I can figure it out. It just might take us a little bit longer. And that's okay sometimes. Okay, so in summary, doesn't matter what your goals are. Listen, my mom follows metabolic efficiency. My kids do. Like, everybody should follow metabolic efficiency training, because the goal is to optimize blood sugar through eating different portions of carbohydrate, protein, and fat throughout the year, throughout the months, throughout the weeks, throughout the days. Well, probably not days, right? But you want to periodize it. You want to change that, always to focus on optimizing blood sugar. It is a non-diet approach. Listen, if you're a calorie counter and you like measuring stuff, power to you, great. But I did not set up metabolic efficiency training to be quantitative. In fact, I don't want it to be quantitative, because I do a lot of work with intuitive eating, habitual eating, right? Not habitual, but intuitive eating, where you learn about your body's cues, when you're hungry, when you're not hungry. If I have this banana and peanut butter, here's what it does for me. If I have this salmon and broccoli, here's what it does for me. I want you to be more intuitive, and that's why I've set up metabolic efficiency training this way. And in the end, it actually helps to reestablish or help you develop a healthier relationship with food when you're ready, right? So a lot of times I think we wear diet handcuffs quite a bit, and we're like, okay, eat this, don't eat that. That's good, that's bad. There's no such thing as good or bad food unless you have a medical condition, food allergy, food intolerance. Normally, we categorize food as good or bad. Actually, I don't even know for what purpose, right? Food is not good or bad. It supplies different needs to our bodies at different times. And that's what we need to be thinking about, right? So, example, I am aging. I know I need more protein most of the time. I periodize my carbohydrate and fat. So I've got my protein up to where it needs to be based on my age and my exercise level, but then I'll increase or decrease fat and carbohydrate during the week to support my training program, right? So if you look at it like that, it starts to make sense a little bit. So if you use metabolic efficiency training, and why wouldn't you? I mean, honestly, there's no reason to, because it's non-diet. You use food. There's no special supplements. There's nothing like that, right? I want you to use it because it just makes sense, right? This is my philosophy. It's not about, oh, this is how many carbs and protein and fat. It's really about, how do we balance blood sugar first through our food? Then we can look at more of those really, really specific details. But for most of us, we just need to look at those teeter totters a little bit more, right? I've got a lot of different strategies and nutrition implementation tools, both in my book, my Metabolic Efficiency Training book. Got a lot of great resources, recipe books, you name it, right? I also want to tell you about my transformation community. So if you're thinking, listen, this sounds good, I'm going to take this, I'm going to roll with it, go for it. Like, I wish you the best. It's actually pretty easy to do, but here's what I've realized over time. And this is why when people come work with me, we always do check-ins about once a month, because they just need a little bit more assistance in that behavior change. So I actually have created a metabolic efficiency transformation community. It's online. It's a month-to-month subscription. Every month, I provide 2 master classes on some topic related to metabolic efficiency training. I do a live Q&A, and then we do a lot of Q&A. We have different groups, if you will, or different little sub-communities within the community where we ask a whole bunch of different questions. And I answer those on supplements, on nutrient timing, on health markers, on testing, on everything, right? It's a great community because it's just, listen, the purpose of community is to support each other, right? So, I can answer questions all day long, but it's the community support that is really, really the cornerstone of the why behind me really putting this together. Super excited about it. I would love it if you would join. You can find the link here, the QR code. You just take your phone right now, do the picture, photo, scan that QR code. It'll take you to the page where you'll find out more information about it. I would recommend it. It's very, very cost efficient. It's not that expensive. It's such a great resource. Everybody in it is like, oh my gosh, this is so beneficial, because they learn not only from me, but from each other, and they get support from each other. It's awesome. Awesome for anybody. Okay. Now, that said, it's not for everybody either, right? So I totally understand that. I've got some great information in this masterclass, great resources on my website, energyperformance.com. So you can find those. It just kind of depends, where are you at in your journey? What do you need? So hopefully this masterclass has provided some great information, some great resources. Reach out to me. Go to the Energy Performance website if you want to reach out. You can find out how to contact me. I thank you so much for spending the time and watching this masterclass. Have a great, great, great day, and I wish you the best in your metabolic efficiency training journey.